Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. Today's webinar is focusing on preventative controls for human food, specifically developing a food safety plan. Our webinar presenter today is Dr. Jang Ho Kim, who is the food safety specialist with University of Idaho Extension. Before we jump into our webinar, I want to go over a couple of webinar tips. It could be helpful to you to close all of the other programs running on your computer so you can dedicate your Wi-Fi bandwidth to the webinar. If you are having any problems with sound, clarity, or speed, you can switch to the phone. The phone number for calling in was provided in your welcome email. If you do switch to the phone, please mute your computer sound when using the phone. You can type questions for Dr. Kim into the Q&A box, which you will see at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical issues, please type those into the chat box. Handouts will be available for you to download on your computer. And at the end of this webinar, we'll show you where you can access those handouts. My name is Colette D. Phelps, and I will be your moderator today, and I will answer any questions that you have in terms of the chat, and we'll provide a facilitated Q&A with our speaker at the conclusion of this webinar. With that, I'd like to hand over the webinar to Dr. Kim.
Thank you, Colette. Hi, everyone. My name is Jang Ho Kim. I'm Consumer Food Safety Extension Specialist at the University of Idaho. And today, I'm going to talk about an overview of food safety plan with the preventive control sample worksheet and document. I believe other webinars already provided basic information about Food Safety Modernization Act, such as when FSMA was initiated and passed by U.S. Congress, something like that, and also what 7 different rules are, including a preventive control for human food rule. So I will just skip this introduction part of FSMA. Okay. If you make processed food, your operation may be covered under 21 Code of Federal Regulation Part 117, Current Good Manufacturing Practices, Hazard Analysis, and Risk-Based Preventive Control for Human Food, simply known as Preventive Controls for Human Food Rule. This rule requires that food safety activities must be done by a preventive control qualified individual if your operation is covered by the rule. This preventive control qualified individual is a qualified individual who has successfully completed FDA certified preventive controls for human food training or equivalent to that received under a standardized curriculum recognized as adequate by FDA, or the individual who is qualified through job experiences to develop and apply a food safety system. As most of you probably know, there are some exemptions and modified requirements. There are exempt or qualified exempt facilities based on the size of annual sales and business. Some food items such as seafood and juice are subject to HACCP regulations. Dietary supplements and alcohol beverages are not covered under FSMA rules. Some activities on farm such as packing, holding, milling grains, extracting oils, and some specific foods such as jam, jellies, preserves, and so on are exempt. Cottage food is regulated by the state cottage food regulation. The covered food facilities must have and implement a written food safety plan that identifies food safety hazards. So food safety plan is a set of written documents that is based on food safety principles. The covered facilities must implement preventive controls to reduce or prevent the identified hazard. The food safety plan includes hazard analysis, preventive control, risk-based supply chain program, recall plan, as well as good manufacturing practices and other prerequisite programs. Hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls are the main component in preventive controls for human food rule. I believe hazard analysis and preventive controls are already covered in the previous preventive controls for human food webinars, and also good manufacturing practice are also covered. So please visit our website and check previous webinars if you need. Preventive controls for human food covers facilities to manufacture, process, pack, or hold human food, and facilities are registered with FDA. And as described earlier, there are some exemptions and modified requirements applied. In order to develop food safety plan, first you need to have a food safety team with quality assurance, quality control personnel, processing supervisor, manager, or external consultant. If you are covered with the rule, you must have a preventive control qualified individual. Basically, the food safety team develop, document, maintain, and review the food safety plan, oversee the food safety plan, and provide proper personal training. Second, you need to describe your product and its distribution. This product description provides product name, food safety characteristics, ingredient, packaging, shelf life, storage, and distribution. We'll talk about this later in this slide. Third, you also describe intended use, which is about retail, food service, or further processing, and any specific handling or preparation. Then you need to describe who the intended consumers are, general public or particular populations such as infants, the elder, pregnant women, or immune suppressed persons. Then you need to develop flow diagram to describe the manufacturing process. This is an example of product description as well as intended use and consumer. It provides product name, detailed product description, and food safety characteristics such as pH, water activity, food additives, etc. And what ingredients are added, how to package, how to prepare consumption, who the intended consumers are, how long the product could be safe, which is shelf life, how to keep the product during storage and distribution. Then signed by processing supervisor, manager, or any other designated person. This is a flow diagram to describe the process from receiving to distribution. And this is very important because you will be able to analyze hazards, determine process control, and parameters based on this flow diagram. Again, food safety plan is a set of food safety documents, and it includes hazard analysis, preventive controls such as process controls, food allergen controls, sanitation controls, and others, supply chain program, and recall plan. In the updated current good manufacturing practices, some provisions such as education and training are now added. Management is required to ensure that all employees are qualified to perform their assigned duties through employee trainings and education. This training and education include worker health and hygiene, principles of food hygiene and safety. Food allergen control is now clearly stated in the regulatory text. Current good manufacturing practices also include a provision for holding and distribution of human food byproducts that are used for animal food. Hazard analysis is the process of collecting and evaluating information on hazards and conditions to decide which are significant for food safety. Since hazards are discussed in the previous webinars, I won't talk about it today in detail. The hazards need to be analyzed in order to determine how severe hazards are, how often hazards occurs without preventive controls, to identify hazards requiring preventive controls, to focus resources on essential preventive controls, to identify operations to be improved, and to consider other factors. This is a hazard analysis form. And in this form, column 1 over here shows each process step from the flow diagram. And column 2 is potential hazard identification in all raw material, ingredient, process, and environment. B stands for biological, C is chemical, and P is physical hazard. Column 3 is a simple yes or no answer indicating whether the hazard requires a preventive control or not. Column 4 is used to justify your answers in column 3. And column 5 is used only when there is a yes in column 3. To identify the preventive controls that significantly minimize or prevent the hazard. This would be process control, allergen control, sanitation control, supply chain program, or other preventive controls. And column 6 is used to document if the preventive control is managed and applied at this step. This is an example of hazard analysis form with omelet process. In column 1, all processing steps shown in the process flow diagram are listed. In column 2, 3, and 4, identify potential hazards, indicate requirements of any preventive control, and justify the reasons. And in column 5, identify any preventive control if there is yes in column 3, and in column 6 indicate if the preventive control is applied at this step. At most of receiving steps, there are potential food allergen hazards. And there are some justification on those decisions, such as labeling on lectin, soy lectin, then identify proper control method at the step. There are some biological and chemical hazards and justification and related preventive control. And all these hazards are not controlled at this step because there are other preventive control at later steps, which are cooking and labeling. We will talk about that. At this receiving step, there are also potential biological and chemical hazards. Biological hazard can be controlled by risk-based supply chain program at this receiving step by acquiring third-party supplier audit record. Okay. And allergen can be controlled by allergen labeling step later. Again, at the receiving step with the allergen hazard, the hazard also can be controlled by sanitation process, sanitation control at a later step. So there is no preventive control applied at this step. At the refrigerated ingredient storage step, biological hazards such as salmonella is identified, but it is considered as not critical. And other steps are safe. At the ingredient mixing step, there is a potential physical hazard like metal, but it will be controlled by the metal detector at a later step. So there's no preventive control applied at this step for metal detection. At cooking step, there is a biological hazard, and proper cooking temperature is a critical process control at this step. At the assembling and wrapping step after cooking, pathogenic bacteria like Listeria monocyte genus or Salmonella could be a potential hazard. And there is no another cooking step after this. So this biological hazard needs to be controlled by sanitation control. I mean, after cooking, there's no to kill step. So this biological hazard needs to be controlled by sanitation step. And also sanitation control can prevent cross-contact allergens also. Here is the metal detection we mentioned earlier. And the potential biological hazards at the spiral freeze step are not considered critical because time is too short for growth to be reasonably likely. So it is not considered as the critical biological hazard. Then at the packaging step, including filling, weighing, and labeling, undeclared allergens can be controlled by correct labeling on carton pack. I'm not going to talk about the potential hazards in detail today because this has been discussed in the previous webinars already. So I'm not going to talk about it in detail. In biological hazard, pathogenic bacteria such as Salmonella, Listeria monocyte genus, E. coli 157, and so on are most and common hazard. And prion, on the other hand, is a peptide substances, some kind of peptide substance causing mad cow disease. In chemical hazards, food allergens are the most common, and also there are potential chemical hazards such as cleanings, sanitizing chemicals and pesticides, and some industrial chemicals and heavy metals, drug residues, and so on. Food allergens develop adverse responses in the body by food containing allergenic proteins, even with a very small amount, depending on individual susceptibility. 8 major allergens are milk, egg, peanut, tree nut, fish, shellfish, wheat, and soy. Labeling on package is the main allergen control method. Okay, let's talk about preventive controls. Preventive controls are measures or operations to significantly reduce or prevent hazards. Preventive controls include process control for critical control point, and allergen control, environmental sanitation control, and supply chain program. If there are control measures by another entity later after manufacturing, the preventive control is not required. For example, if the product is if your product is instructed to cook before consumption, the complete preventive control is not needed. In the food safety plan, after hazard analysis, preventive controls are considered, and parameters and values for the control operation are set. Then these parameters and values in the preventive controls are monitored and corrected if needed, and then verify the controls and record keeping. Preventive controls are risk-based proper procedures, practices, and processes to significantly minimize or prevent the hazards identified under the hazard analysis based on scientific evidence. The preventive control include process control to kill pathogenic bacteria or microorganisms, such as cooking, or to prevent microbial growth, such as time temperature controls, allergen controls, such as labeling, sanitation controls to prevent recontamination and allergen cross-contact, supply chain programs for sensitive ingredients used without a kill step, and recall plan. We will talk about this briefly later slides. Okay, the preventive controls include, we did that. The process controls are procedure, practices, and process to control parameters with the minimum or maximum values during operations. The critical limit must be controlled to significantly minimize or prevent a hazard. Critical limits can be decided based on regulatory outline, expert, scientific studies, and literature. Then the process control must be monitored based on what, how often, how, and who. If there are deviations, any necessary corrective action must be taken. Okay, critical limit. Critical limit is the maximum or minimum value of or combination of values to which any biological, chemical, or physical parameter must be controlled to significantly minimize or prevent any hazards requiring a process control. Again, critical limit can be decided based on regulatory guidelines, experts like university scientists, specialists, etc., and scientific study like in-house or third-party challenge study, and scientific literature like scientific journals. This table shows examples of the critical limit of process control. In ready-to-eat, cooked, and refrigerated product with biological hazards such as Listeria monocyte genus, cooking is the process control, and its critical limit is internal product temperature of 160 Fahrenheit degree or higher for at least 1.5 minutes. In dried product with pathogen growth, drying is the process control, and the critical limit are properly drying temperature over 200 Fahrenheit degree for 2 hours, over 2 hours, with proper airflow rate. For acidification, for acidified product, less than pH 4.6 and the 3.5% of acetic acid concentration is the critical limit. This is the process control form, and it will be completed with using the hazard analysis information. As you can see here, upper form is hazard analysis form, and lower is process control form. So among all ingredients and processing steps in the hazard analysis form, the cooking is a critical step to kill pathogenic bacteria. So the cooking step is a process control, and pathogenic bacteria is a hazard to be controlled in the cooking process control. Okay. The critical limit of the cooking is the internal omelet temperature with 158 Fahrenheit degree or higher just before transfer to the assembly or wrapping table. Okay. The next step in the cooking process control is monitoring. Monitoring is the procedure to make sure preventive controls are consistently working correctly. Monitoring tracks processing operations and the trends of the critical limit that may need process operation calibration or adjustment. Monitoring also identifies when there is any loss of control from a critical limit. Monitoring must be recorded to verify the process is under control. Parameters or values such as temperature, time, pH, chemical concentration, something like that are usually monitored. Then you need to document what, how often, and who monitors. In this case, the internal omelet temperature, 158 Fahrenheit degree, is monitored 4 times per operation shift, like every 2 to 3 hours, using infrared surface thermometer by quality assurance technician or designees. This is a cook log to monitor omelet temperature. The QA technician or designee records this cook log every 2 to 3 hours. If there is any noticeable deviation, the recorder needs to report to the supervisor or any person who is in charge of this operation. And then the food safety team will take any corrective action or correction. If the preventive control is not properly working, we need to take any action to correct it. That is corrective action. Corrective actions identifies and corrects any problem, reduce the chance of reoccurrence, evaluate affected food product for safety, and prevent affected food from selling and distributing until the problem is solved. These are examples of corrective actions. Immediately adjust process, stop processing line when deviation occurs, apply alternative process, repair equipment, retain employees if necessary, or evaluate operation, including formulation. If you have any defect product, hold, evaluate the product, and determine the disposition of the product, such as release, reprocess, or destroy it. In the process control form, you need to record the corrective action to be taken. In this cooking step, the food safety team decides to hold and evaluate the product for its disposition. If the deviation repeats, it may need to examine root causes. This is the corrective action form. You need to document date of record, and product lot number, description of problem and root causes, and action taken, the person to take action, amount of defect and root causes, and the deposition of product if decided. Then lastly, document the reviewer's name and signature and review date. Verification is a long-term and ongoing action to ensure that the preventive controls are consistently implemented and effective to prevent and reduce hazard. Verification could be a scientific validations for the effectiveness of preventive control through scientific research data, consulting with experts, or conducting implant study or challenge study, or calibration or monitoring and verification devices such as thermometer. Reviewing record is also a verification process to make sure the monitoring and corrective actions are working correctly, and its reviewing process is conducted by preventive control qualified individual. This is what you do for cooking verification and document in the process control form. Review the cook log, corrective action, and verification records in 7 working days, and validate, calibrate the thermometer if necessary. The last step of the process control is record keeping. Record keeping is a documentation process for preventive control, monitoring, and corrective actions, as well as verification. And also it includes supply chain program and training records. The records must be original, true copies, or electronic. Actual values or observation needs to be recorded. And this context must be accurate, permanent, and legible document. As you can see, cook log, corrective action, verification need to be recorded. Food allergen control is one of preventive controls. It includes any means to control allergen cross-contact within a facility, and to make sure all food allergens are correctly labeled. Again, 8 major food allergens are milk, egg, peanut, tree nut, fish, crustacean shellfish, wheat, and soy. The failure of food allergen control is so critical because consumer reaction could be so severe, and it is major causes of the food recalls. Allergen control must be taken to protect allergic consumer, to provide safe food, and then avoid companies' risk. Using this product line allergen assessment form, you need to identify and document any potential allergens as well as potential implication. These potential implications are scheduling implication and cleaning implications. This is the older monitoring records for sanitation to prevent allergen cross-contact. The allergen clean must be done after the production containing allergens, and process low-risk product first and then high-risk product later. This is the allergen label check monitoring log. The label for allergenic ingredients should be checked by production lot and by the line operator. In general, sanitation control to clean and sanitize food contact surfaces to prevent microbial contamination and allergen cross-contact. For example, environmental pathogens can contaminate ready-to-eat food before packaging, or allergens can be transferred to other allergen-free products by uncleaned surfaces. So sanitation control must record monitoring, corrective actions, and verification related to sanitation. This is the daily sanitation control record to control allergens. The area of the to be sanitized, and goals, and sanitation schedule, and comment or correction taken, and the operator must be provided. If a hazard related to ingredient is identified and the supply can controls that hazard, a risk-based supply chain program must be implemented. Through the supply chain program, you must use approved suppliers, determine and conduct proper supply verification activities such as on-site audit, sampling and testing, suppliers' food safety record, and document all suppliers' verification activities. If there is any hazard requiring a preventive control, you must have a written recall plan. A recall plan must include procedure to notify consignees and the public if necessary, to check effectiveness and to properly dispose recall product. On being recalled, violated products must be removed from the market. Recall may be conducted on the manufacturer's own initiative or by FDA or state authority. Recall needs to be classified into class 1, 2, and 3 depending on severity of adverse health consequences. I think that's all. And today, all forms discussed in this webinar today are available in our website, as well as examples of food safety plan. If you have any question, just let me know.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. We don't have any questions today, so let's go ahead and look at this slide. You can view the recorded webinars and learn more about preventative controls and food safety at this website, www.pacificnorthwestfoodsafety.org. This webinar will be posted later this afternoon, as are the materials that Dr. Kim discussed for developing a food safety plan. So we have an example and the sheets that you will need posted at this website. Thank you so much for your presentation today and for joining us on this webinar. We hope that you have a great afternoon.